Did you know you have secret abilities in your mind that no one ever told you about? Authors, directors, actors, and creative people use these abilities all the time, whether they realize it or not. In this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into thought forms, spirits, and entities, and how honing these hidden abilities can help you to a more spiritual and intentional life. Hey everyone, Isho here. As we develop new skills, especially through language and inner dialogue, it becomes possible to create thought forms or even initiate contact with the spiritual realm, sometimes by accident. So, what exactly is a thought form? What types are there, and how can understanding them help you unlock the deeper abilities of your mind? In this episode, we'll assume you've already reached a basic level of meditative awareness. That's important because unless you know what your mind is doing when prompted or what it does automatically, you won't be able to spot these forms in action. The first type of thought form you may encounter is what may be called a basic parroting kind. This form takes a simple input and repeats it back to you. It's created through habitual thought. Here's an example. You go to a restaurant and see a menu item. You think, that looks like a nice burger. Unknowingly, you've just started forming a parrot thought form. Next time you see the brand logo of the same restaurant, your mind might instantly echo, nice burger. This kind of thought form operates like a reflex, and to an untrained or passive mind, these thought habits can start running your life. They tempt you, they influence your cravings, they trigger you into repeating past desires. The simplest way to stop or weaken this type of thought form is to bring in awareness and say no. The second type is more advanced. It's known as a servitor or an egregore. To be clear, thought forms are not inherently good or bad. It's how you interact with them and how much influence you allow them to have that determines their outcome. If we set aside the collective egregores for now and focus on the personal variety, the servitor becomes something like a memory-based assistant. You've probably used one hundreds of times already without noticing. Let's test that now. There's going to be a few simple math problems on screen. Watch what happens inside your mind. Monitor it closely. Don't rush. Ready? Did you catch it? Was your math servitor helping you solve these problems without effort? Did you hear or see the answers instantly as the problems appeared on screen? If you've completed basic education, K-12, high school, or even just primary school, chances are your mind has built up a reflex system for handling simple arithmetic. It retrieves answers and pushes them to the surface before you even realize it. That's how a servitor egregore works. It takes a trigger input like a symbol, a question, or an equation, searches your mental archive for the answer, and delivers it automatically to your conscious awareness. You might say, isn't that just how memory works? Yes, but we're not focusing on what you can recall. We're exploring how that mental process operates in the unseen, in the subtle layers of your mind. We're pulling back the curtain on the metaphysical mechanism itself. The third type of thought form is known as a tulpa, or what's commonly called an imaginary friend. And the fourth type is what we'll call a godform, a public egregore that has been elevated to divine status. We'll get to both of these in a moment, but first, let's take a deeper look at the first two thought forms and what they reveal about you and your inner world. The first type of thought form, the parrot, is created from a young age, often automatically and unconsciously. It starts when someone tells you to think before you act. From that moment on, you begin thinking manually, using your native language. You narrate your world internally. You analyze, judge, react, but few people realize that this voice isn't always them. Sadly, this inner voice is also where many negative thought patterns begin to take root, seeding doubt, fear, and emotional conflict. Phrases like, I'm tired, I'm sad, I can't do this, these become more than just passing thoughts, they become programs. To better understand this, let's quote both Henry Ford and Confucius, who essentially said the same thing. Those who believe they can and those who believe they can't are both right. That quote captures the core danger and power of thought forms. One of the biggest challenges with these parroting thought forms is that people often believe their inner voice over the external voices of others, even when those external voices offer reason, truth, or care. But here's the good news. You can always take back control. You do it by not believing everything your mind tells you. If you treat your thoughts with the same scrutiny you give to strangers, you'll start to regain control over your internal landscape. You'll begin to question the train of thought instead of boarding it automatically. You'll stop being the passenger, you'll become the observer, and eventually the conductor. There's an inherent trust we give to our inner voice. Maybe it's because we believe that voice must be us. After all, it's coming from within our minds. But if you've been watching this channel for a while, you might remember the adversary is cunning. It hides behind thought forms, it masquerades as the voice of reason, it mimics your tone, your fears, your doubts, so you'll listen. But to be guided by the adversary is to be bound in its chains. In comparison to the parrot, which is an A input, A output kind of thought form, the servitor is a little bit more complex. It takes A as input and gives you B as output. Think of it like this. You recall a memory. That memory then pulls up a reaction, a feeling, a meaning. But here's the key. Your memory of an event and the event itself are not inherently good or bad. The emotional charge, the judgment, the label, that's your reaction to it. That's where things become distorted. The servitor thought form doesn't care about good or bad. It's not your therapist, it's not your moral compass, it just serves. When you use a reference point, a phrase, a smell, a location, the servitor pulls out the associated memory, reaction, or data and presents it to your conscious mind. If you've assigned pain or judgment to that memory, then the servitor will deliver that pain right back to you, like a dutiful librarian pulling out a dusty file labeled unresolved guilt. This is why it's so important to become impartial to your memories, to see them with clear eyes, because if your mind is still emotionally tangled in your past, you won't be able to access those memories cleanly, without bias and without distortion. And here's where inner work becomes alchemy. Mastering how to heal yourself and your memories allow the servitor thought form to function at its highest potential. When you can look at your past from a third-person perspective, your memories stop being wounds and become information, neutral, useful, floating in your archive. Healing your emotional reactions is like polishing the lens of your inner camera. And once that lens is clear, your servitor can serve you truth instead of trauma. Now that we've covered the two simpler types of thought forms, it's time to explore the most advanced and nuanced of them all, the tulpa. The word tulpa comes from Tibetan Buddhism, derived from sprulpa, a materialized being or thought form often in human shape, created through intense spiritual practice and deep concentration. In the West, psychology hasn't done nearly enough research on this phenomena, but if more were understood about tulpas, we could help millions of people make sense of what some traditions call the origin of suffering. Ask around and you'll find that many people have, at some point, interacted with what they'd call an imaginary friend, or they know someone who has. Whether they realize it or not, that's tulpa work already in motion. But things take an even more interesting turn when we consider this. The train of thoughts known as the ego, by definition, is a tulpa, an imaginary friend. Just like parroting and servitor thought forms, the ego is a construct shaped by habitual use of thought. It's not your true self, it's a mental character you've been narrating unconsciously for years. We can see this creation process clearly in how authors build characters in fiction. Writers and filmmakers routinely generate tulpas when they invent protagonists and supporting roles for their stories. This process is called narrating. The creator gives the tulpa certain attributes, personality traits, habits, beliefs, and those traits begin to feel real. It's no different from how your own ego was formed. The only real distinction is that fictional characters are often exaggerated for drama, while the ego tulpa is more grounded, tied to your real world experiences and self image, but the mechanism is exactly the same. So here's a question. Have you become more aware of your own ego tulpa just by watching this episode? Have you noticed an internal voice responding to what is being said in this video? Have opinions, reactions, or inner commentary been bubbling up as we've explored these topics? That's the thought form of the ego, your imaginary friend pretending to be you. It whispers back to you, it comments, it reacts, it gives opinions, but it's not you. It's a mask trying to take over the actor. Let's test it. Ask yourself right now inside your mind, who am I? Did your mind respond with something like, I'm human, I'm thinking, I am who I am? That wasn't you. You were the one who asked the question, something else answered. Try this. What will my next thought be? You'll notice the ego immediately blurts something out. Maybe it says, whatever I want. Maybe it just throws out randomness. That's the tulpa, the ego, a puppet made of habits. It hides behind your thoughts, it mimics your voice, and over time you've been tricked into thinking it's you. This is the adversary, the world demon, the one many call the devil. This is why meditation is absolutely essential for any form of tulpa work or what some call tulpamancy. Without deep self-awareness, you'll remain trapped in the illusion that the ego is you. But when you meditate and reach the crystal clear state of mind, you reclaim your power. You cut the strings of the puppet. You insert awareness and stillness between your thoughts. In that space, your feelings and emotions can finally flow without interference. You no longer need commentary. You no longer need internal narration. You just know what you're feeling and you return to the present. With that out of the way, we can now cover the final type of thought form, the most advanced and at times externalized version of the tulpa and egregore, the god form. You've probably heard stories like this before. Someone lying in bed, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, when a radiant being appears, glowing with light, delivering a message. But what most people don't know is that these appearances are often thought forms as well, and they can originate externally, manifested by an individual or even a collective or group of people. This makes it incredibly difficult, especially for beginners, to tell the difference between an internal apparition and an external entity. God forms can appear to those who haven't yet mastered their ego, and in that vulnerable state, the ego can actually feed into the God form, amplifying its power and reinforcing its message, no matter how deceptive. It's not uncommon to hear stories of radiant beings appearing in the shape of Christ, delivering grand revelations, but how often do you hear of Buddha doing the same, especially in the West? This discrepancy implies something crucial. Thought forms are often filtered through the lens of consciousness. A person must already hold some concept of the being before it can appear in their lives. This is why it's so important to train the mind through techniques like wake-induced astral projection and advanced meditations. Otherwise, you're just lying in the shadows of Plato's cave, watching flickers on the wall, never knowing who or what cast them. A god form can assume any identity, living or dead, divine or demonic, if its intention is to deceive the observer. That's why spiritual systems have long encouraged the practice of invocation, summoning, and working with deities consciously, intentionally, rather than passively waiting for one to appear uninvited. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The true beauty of the God form emerges when it is created from within, intentionally, for the purpose of your own spiritual ascent. This form arises not from the unconscious, not from the projections of other minds, but from the inner sun and moon, the divine masculine and feminine, the middle way and path, the pillar of balance. This god form is not some wandering egregore pretending to be Christ or Odin or Kali. It's a manifestation of your higher nature, shaped by your intention and guided by your integrity. To protect its sacredness, many mystics give this form a secret name, one that only they know. This limits the risk of contamination from external systems, other people's projections, or parasites masquerading as angels. At this point, the god form becomes something deeper, the inner guru, the true spirit guide. This is the kind of thought form that respects your autonomy, your spiritual sovereignty, and the free will of others. It serves to lift you up, not dominate you. Of course, the risk of self-deception is never zero. If your ego is still unchecked, even your god form can be corrupted, twisting it into a mask of self-righteousness or delusion. Because the veil of ignorance doesn't just cover you, it covers the thought forms you interact with too. And that's the lesson: knowing is half the battle. When you get far enough along with your spiritual inquiries, at some point a spirit guide may appear in your life. Maybe it already did when you were young, maybe it arrived as a coping mechanism born from pain or trauma, or maybe it came to you as a divine kickstart, a nudge towards your spiritual path, just as God intended. The spirit guide becomes a kind of mediator between you and the divine. It brings comfort, perspective, and insight, especially when traversing the astral realms or navigating deep reflective dreams. This guide acts as a translator for your experiences. It helps you find closure, understanding, and integration for the things that physical life cannot explain, but the soul remembers. Now, here's something most traditions won't say plainly. The true esoteric purpose of all spiritual systems is to bring the seeker to a place where they can invoke, create, and meet their own inner spirit guide. Not to remain dependent on a temple, not to bow eternally before a book or priest, but to have a direct, living, tailored connection with higher knowledge. However, there's a problem. When you're finally shown higher truths, when you reach the edge of the veil, your ego might reject it, might deny it, might attack it, and this resistance can delay your awakening for years, sometimes lifetimes. That's why discernment is critical. You must learn to tell the difference between lower astral thought forms that seek to deceive and higher beings that come to liberate. Here is where the super irony sets in. Most Christians today, those who believe superficially without proof or direct experience, will call their own Christian Judaic angels divine, while branding Hindu or Buddhist beings as demonic. They don't realize that the Hindu system directly influenced Mesopotamian mythology, which became the foundation of Canaanite and Babylonian religions, the same traditions that birthed Yahweh, El, and the entire angelic hierarchy they now worship. So, when they pray to Archangel Michael, they're invoking a Canaanite war general. Let's look closer. Michael is a divine enforcer through violence. Gabriel allegedly helped destroy the Assyrian army of Sennacherib, part of the angels who killed 185,000 soldiers overnight. Raphael, linked to healing, is also the angel of diseases and plagues. Uriel is the cold messenger of apocalyptic doom. Who is the unnamed angel of the Lord in Exodus that kills every firstborn in Egypt? Or in the second book of Samuel, the angel that unleashes a plague that kills 70,000 Israelites after David's census? In Genesis, the angels who obliterate Sodom and Gomorrah. And yet, modern Christians toss these names around like they're symbols of love and light. They don't realize these beings were associated with genocide, wrath, and divine authoritarianism. Yahweh, also known as Vishnu in earlier forms, was not some benevolent sky dad. He was a Canaanite war deity, no less destructive than Genghis Khan or Hitler, if you measure by body count and devastation. Christians, do you even know what you're worshipping? You are worshipping the subjugation, domination, and destruction of your own people, and you're calling it holy. These are not spirit guides. They are red flags when viewed through the lens of true spirituality. How many of your daily thoughts are truly yours, and how many are just parrots echoing old habits? Have you ever caught your mind responding to you like a separate voice, giving answers you didn't consciously create? Are you reacting to your memories or observing them? Does your thought serve you or do you serve them? When was the last time you questioned the identity of the inner voice guiding your actions? What name would your ego give itself if it had to be honest about its agenda? Is your current worldview shaped by your own spiritual experiences or by thought forms passed down by others? Have you ever mistaken a spiritual encounter for something divine when it may have been a projection of your own desires or fears? If a radiant being appeared in your room tonight, how would you know if it was truly there to help you? Have you ever met your spirit guide, or have you only ever heard the voice of your ego in disguise? If your ego died today, what would be left of you? Would you dare to create a God form tailored to your highest self, or are you still afraid of your own power? Who benefits from keeping you confused about the difference between spiritual sovereignty and religious slavery? Have you worshipped war while praying for peace? Can you silence the thoughts long enough to finally hear your true self? Truth can often be stranger than any fiction. The topics we've covered and questions explored and the wonders they stir are just threads in a much larger, infinite tapestry. Take what resonates with you, explore the unknown, and never stop questioning the answers you've been given. Subscribe if you wish to journey further down the spiral into the forgotten, the forbidden, and the transformative. Together, we can seek wisdom that reaches beyond the perceived boundaries of belief.